The air in the room is thick, smelling faintly of old money and fresh betrayal. I'm sitting across the polished mahogany desk. The lawyer's face a mask of practiced sympathy. He's talking, words like irretrievable, dissipation of assets, fraudulent transfer, but they bounce off a wall inside my skull. All I see is the number. A clean, round, impossible number. $3 million. Vanished. Poof. Like a magic trick, but instead of a rabbit, my future disappeared. My breath catches. A dry, rasping sound in my throat. My fingers grip the worn leather of my handbag, knuckles white. This can't be real. This is a bad dream. I just need to wake up. But the cold, hard reality of the balance statement stares back at me, a zero where everything used to be. And the lawyer's quiet, grim nod confirms it. This is no dream. This is the end. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. Before this, my life felt built, piece by piece, solid, like a house with deep foundations. 20 years of marriage. John and me. It wasn't a fairy tale, not the breathless movie kind, but it was ours. It was comfortable, predictable. We had routines, shared jokes, the quiet understanding that comes from navigating 2 decades side by side. He worked hard, built his business from the ground up, something in logistics, complex, dry stuff I never fully understood, but I saw the hours, the stress lines deepen around his eyes, the way he'd fall asleep with spreadsheets still open on his laptop. I managed the home front, ran my small online antique business, saved, invested. We were a team. Partners. The goal was retirement. Early, if possible. A quiet life by the coast. We'd pore over maps, real estate listings for charming bungalows with ocean views. That $3 million account wasn't just money. It was the keys to that bungalow. The salty air on our faces. The long walks on the beach. It was freedom. It was our someday. It was everything we had worked for, sacrificed for, together. We built that number, dollar by painful dollar, choice by choice, saying no to luxuries today for security tomorrow. It was the anchor of our shared future. My future was entirely tied to his, woven into the fabric of our joint lives, our joint bank accounts, our joint dreams. The first tremor was small. A notification about an unusual charge on the joint credit card. A significant amount. Not business. Not something I recognized. A boutique I'd never heard of, hundreds of miles away. I flagged it, sent John a text. Hey, what's this charge? His reply was quick, too quick. Business trip expense. Forgot to tell you, it felt flimsy, but okay. He was busy. He traveled sometimes. I let it go. Then another. And another. Different places, different charges, all high-end, all non-business. My stomach started to twist. A cold, metallic taste in my mouth. I started checking the statements more closely. The joint checking account, usually steady, showed large outgoing wire transfers. To accounts I didn't recognize. Not suppliers. Not taxes. Not payroll. Something felt deeply wrong. I confronted him. Sat him down after dinner. Tried to keep my voice steady. John, what's happening with the money? He looked tired. Ran a hand through his hair. Just restructuring some investments. Diversifying. Nothing for you to worry about diversifying. He'd used that word before. But always with discussion. With shared research. Not like this. Not in secret. His eyes wouldn't meet mine. He was usually so open about finances, meticulous even. This secrecy felt like a physical weight in the room. The air grew thin. I pushed gently. But why now? Why without talking to me? Where is it going? He finally looked at me, and there was a flash of something I didn't recognize. Defensiveness? Anger? It's handled. Don't worry about it, okay? Trust me, trust me. The words felt like a slap. Trust had always been the bedrock. Now it felt conditional. And the condition was I stop asking questions. I didn't stop. I couldn't. The knot in my stomach tightened into a hard, cold stone. My first real struggle was grappling with the unthinkable. John? Hiding money? From me? The sheer scale of the transfers was terrifying. Hundreds of thousands at a time, moving out of our joint accounts like water through a sieve. I tried talking to him again, harder this time. He became evasive, then irritable, then outright hostile. "You don't trust me, do you?" he'd snap. "After everything I've built for us?" He twisted it, turned my legitimate questions into an attack on his character, on our marriage. I started digging myself, painstakingly. Online banking records, old statements, anything I could find. It was like wading through mud. He was careful. The transfers were labeled vaguely. Shell companies? Fake investments? My mind raced, trying to construct scenarios, none of which made sense in the context of the man I thought I knew. I felt like a detective in my own home, the place that was supposed to be my sanctuary, now feeling like a stage for a crime I couldn't yet name. I reached out to a friend who was a lawyer, just for informal advice. She listened patiently, her face growing serious as I described the sums, the secrecy. His reaction. "You need to get a forensic accountant," she said gently. "And you need to be prepared for whatever they find, forensic accountant." The word sounded like something out of a crime drama. This couldn't be happening to us. But the accounts were undeniable. The money was gone. And the truth, whatever it was, felt enormous and terrifying, looming just out of sight. The situation didn't just stay bad, it actively deteriorated. John wasn't just secretive anymore, he was actively isolating me. He started controlling access to information, changing passwords, making sure bank statements went to his office. Our conversations became strained, then non-existent unless necessary. The house felt like a battleground, silent and tense. The quiet moments were the worst, filled with unspoken accusations and mounting suspicion. I felt utterly alone. The friend I'd spoken to urged me to consult a divorce lawyer, officially this time. The consultation was grim. The lawyer explained the difficulty of tracing dissipated assets, especially if they've been moved overseas or disguised through complex transactions. It would be expensive, time-consuming, and there was no guarantee of recovery. He spoke of marital waste and fraudulent conveyances, legal terms that sounded too formal, too cold for the raw, personal violation I felt. He needed proof, hard evidence of where the money went and why. How could I get that? John had locked me out. I felt paralyzed. The dream of the coastal bungalow wasn't just fading, it felt like it had been incinerated. My small business wasn't enough to support me long-term, not with the costs of potentially fighting this in court, not to mention simply living. Fear gnawed at me constantly. Fear of poverty, fear of homelessness, fear of the future stretching ahead empty and uncertain. The man I'd shared my life with, the one person I trusted implicitly with everything, had, it seemed, systematically dismantled our shared security. It wasn't just the money, it was the betrayal itself, a deep, gaping wound that poisoned every memory, every shared glance, every whispered promise. He wasn't just hiding something, he was actively working against me, against us. The weight of this realization was crushing. I felt like I was drowning, the solid ground of my life dissolving beneath my feet. Every path I saw led to ruin. Every attempt to understand, to talk, to reason, was met with a locked door or a sharp, dismissive word. He built walls around the truth, and I was trapped outside, cold and exposed. The legal system felt like a maze designed to protect the perpetrator, demanding proof I couldn't get, requiring funds I no longer had access to. It felt hopeless. Truly, deeply hopeless. Then, a crack appeared in the wall. It was mundane, almost laughable in its simplicity, considering the magnitude of the crisis. I was doing some tedious work, sorting through old files in our home office, the kind of administrative detritus that piles up over years. Bills, tax documents, receipts. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just trying to impose some order on the chaos that mirrored my internal state. Tucked away in a folder marked insurance, something fluttered out. It was a glossy brochure. Not for insurance. It was from a high-end cosmetic surgery clinic, the kind that caters to the very wealthy. It wasn't ours. I flipped through it, bewildered. Why would this be in our files? Then I saw it. A sticky note attached to one of the pages. It had a name and a date. The name wasn't mine. It was Celeste. And the date was recent. Very recent. A cold dread washed over me. Celeste. John had been taking more calls lately, hushed conversations he'd end abruptly when I entered the room. Celeste. The exotic boutique charges, the large wire transfers that all started clicking into place with a sickening certainty. This wasn't about investments. This wasn't restructuring. This was about her. The $3 million wasn't gone, not truly gone. It had been given away. For this. For cosmetic surgery?
Million?
It seemed absurd, but the pieces fit the ugly picture forming in my mind. Adultery. And he was financing it. Lavishly. With our future. With my future. The realization hit me like a physical blow. He hadn't just stolen my money. He had used it to build a life with someone else. A life based on deception and built on the ruins of ours. The pain was sharp, searing, but beneath it, a flicker of something else ignited. Anger. Pure. White-hot fury. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was personal. Deeply, fundamentally personal. I wasn't just a victim of financial fraud. I was a victim of a profound, intimate betrayal. The hopelessness didn't vanish, but it was joined by a hard, determined resolve. I wasn't going to go down quietly. Not for him. Not for her. I wouldn't let them take everything and walk away clean, living their lavish new life while I was left with nothing. I looked at the brochure again. The name Celeste burned into my mind. Cosmetic surgery, the clinic, the dates. The money trail had to lead here, somehow. This wasn't just a random mistress. This was someone John was pouring millions into. And that kind of money, moving around for non-business purposes, especially for something like plastic surgery, had to leave tracks. Tracks someone might find interesting. Like tax authorities. Suddenly, the legal fight, which had seemed so daunting, felt like a necessary evil. A path I had to walk, not just for recovery, but for vindication. The lawyer had said he needed proof. Proof of where the money went, proof of why. This brochure was a clue, a starting point. It wasn't just about divorcing John anymore. It was about understanding Celeste. Who was she? Where did she come from? And how on earth could she justify receiving millions for cosmetic work without raising serious questions? My strategy shifted dramatically. It wasn't just about clawing back the money from John. It was about understanding the recipient. The one who benefited directly from the theft of my future. I had been focused on the hand that took the money from the joint account. Now I needed to focus on the hand that received it on the other side. Celeste. The name tasted like ash in my mouth, but it also felt like a key. A key to unlocking the truth, and perhaps a key to unlocking my own way out of this mess. The game had changed. It wasn't just about defense anymore. It was time to go on the offensive. The weeks and months that followed were a blur of fear, secrecy, and grinding effort. While John continued his charade, growing more distant, more entitled, I was operating in the shadows of our shared life. He thought I was defeated, broken, maybe just slow to accept the inevitable divorce he clearly wanted. He didn't see me spending late nights in the home office he thought he'd secured, using my old laptop, meticulously piecing together fragmented information. The cosmetic surgery brochure was my starting point. I found the clinic online. Upscale, discreet, known for wealthy clientele. It listed its location. That matched some of the charges on the credit card statements I'd found before he locked me out. I cross-referenced dates with John's travel schedule, dates he claimed were for business trips they matched. The trips weren't for logistics conferences. They were trips to see Celeste and fund her transformation. Finding Celeste herself was harder. She wasn't on social media under that name. She was careful. But the clinic was a physical location. People worked there. Maybe someone talked. Maybe there was a slip-up. I started visiting the area near the clinic, not drawing attention to myself, just observing. I knew it was a long shot, maybe crazy, but I had nothing else. I felt like a spy in my own life story. My early struggles had been reactive. Now, I was proactive, but still desperately vulnerable. John held all the cards, or so he believed. The money was gone. He was clearly preparing for a divorce where he'd claim limited assets, having squirreled everything away with his mistress. My lawyer was still pessimistic about tracing the money. Without clear evidence of where it went and its fraudulent nature, it's incredibly difficult, he'd warned. And proving it was specifically for plastic surgery, that's a motive, yes, but the money trail itself is key. The deepening crisis wasn't just the financial black hole, it was the emotional toll of living a double life under the same roof as the person who had destroyed mine. John would occasionally make passive-aggressive comments about my lack of understanding of his business or my resistance to change. He was projecting, I knew. He saw me as the obstacle, the past he needed to shed to embrace his shiny new future with Celeste. He didn't see the quiet rage simmering beneath my surface, the hours spent hunched over my laptop, researching offshore accounts, international wire transfers, tax regulations related to large gifts and undeclared income. I learned about shell corporations and nominee accounts. I learned about the reporting requirements for financial institutions. I was entering a world I never knew existed, a shadowy realm where enormous sums of money moved like ghosts, designed to evade detection. The scale of the betrayal became clearer the deeper I dug. This wasn't just a fling and a few expensive gifts. This was a complete redirection of our wealth, meticulously planned, systematically executed. He had been building Celeste up financially, positioning her, maybe even setting her up in business, using our money. The plastic surgery was likely just a small, visible part of a much larger financial transfer. Why would he do this? What hold did she have over him? It didn't matter. The why was less important than the how and the where. I needed to find the money. I needed to connect it to Celeste. My research led me down complex rabbit holes. Offshore jurisdictions, numbered accounts, trusts. It felt overwhelming. Every step forward seemed to reveal 10 new layers of obfuscation. My funds were dwindling. The cost of even basic legal consultation felt like a burden. I had to be strategic about every penny. I couldn't afford a full forensic investigation, not yet. I had to find the breadcrumbs myself. One frustrating afternoon, searching public records online for anything related to Celeste and the clinic's location, I stumbled upon something unexpected. Not a direct link to money, but something about a property transfer involving a holding company. The company name was generic, but the address listed for the registered agent was familiar. It was a building downtown known for housing law firms and financial services companies. I cross-referenced the holding company's name with other public databases. It had been registered relatively recently, and Celeste was listed as a director. A director of a company that had just acquired a significant piece of real estate. Using our money. This was it. A concrete link. Not just a brochure, but a legal entity, a tangible asset, connected directly to Celeste, formed right around the time our joint account was being drained. And a large real estate acquisition that would involve significant funds. Funds that likely came from John. Funds that likely weren't declared. This wasn't just about plastic surgery anymore. This was about major financial maneuvering, real estate, business structures. The sheer audacity of it, building an empire for his mistress with his wife's money, took my breath away. My quiet rage hardened into cold, focused determination. They weren't just betraying me. They were potentially engaging in serious financial crimes. And that, unlike marital infidelity or asset dissipation in a divorce, brought in a whole different level of authority. This realization was my turning point. I had proof of connection. Celeste. The company. The property. The dates aligned with the draining of the accounts. It wasn't the full money trail, not yet, but it was enough. Enough to be credible. Enough to pique the interest of someone with more power and resources than a weary divorce lawyer and a wife armed with a laptop and a brochure. I knew what I had to do. It was risky. It involved stepping out of the shadows and into a much larger, more dangerous game. It meant exposing not just John's infidelity and theft, but potentially uncovering serious financial crimes committed by both him and Celeste. It meant involving federal agencies, people who dealt with fraud and undeclared income on a massive scale. It felt terrifying, like stepping off a cliff. But the alternative was ruin. And the fire of indignation burned brighter than the fear. I wasn't the woman who had discovered the empty bank account, paralyzed by shock and despair. I was the woman who had stared into the abyss of betrayal and found the courage to fight back, not just for survival, but for justice. The time for quiet desperation was over. It was time to make some noise. Loud, official noise. The mistress, Celeste, was indicted for tax fraud. The news broke quietly at first, a small item in the business section of the local paper, mentioning an individual and a holding company under investigation for undeclared income and asset acquisition. My heart hammered against my ribs as I read it. It was her. The name, the company, the details, they matched my painstaking research. My secret work had paid off. I had provided the information anonymously, compiled my evidence into a detailed, structured report, and sent it to the relevant authorities. I knew they would look into it. Large, sudden real estate acquisitions by newly formed companies with obscure directors often raise red flags. But I didn't know if it would lead to anything concrete, or if it would happen quickly enough to help me.
Now it had.
The indictment confirmed they had found something significant, something criminal. This wasn't just a small tax evasion case. The sums involved, the complexity of the holding company structure, suggested something much larger. And I knew, with absolute certainty, where that money had come from. Our joint account. My future. Celeste was in serious trouble. Federal trouble. And John, who had funneled millions to her, who had helped set up the very structures now under scrutiny, was inextricably linked to her legal nightmare. He might have thought he was clever, hiding the money with her, thinking it was beyond my reach in a divorce. But he hadn't counted on her getting caught for something completely separate, something that would inevitably shine a spotlight on all her financial dealings, including the massive, unexplained influx of cash from her married lover. I waited. The timing was everything. John still hadn't initiated divorce proceedings, perhaps sensing I was financially crippled and he could dictate terms, or maybe he was already starting to feel the heat from Celeste's situation, unsure how to proceed. He was walking on eggshells, tense, irritable, but still outwardly projecting an air of control. He had no idea I was the one who had dropped the match into the tinderbox. The day of the climax arrived subtly. I asked him to sit down. No yelling, no accusations, just a quiet request to talk. He looked wary, probably expecting another tearful plea or a demand for answers he wasn't going to give. He sat across from me in the living room, the room where we'd shared so many ordinary evenings, now crackling with unspoken tension. I held the newspaper in my hand, folded to the business section. "We need to talk about Celeste," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside me. His face immediately tightened. "What about her?" "I told you." "I know about the money, John," I interrupted, cutting him off. "All of it. The $3 million. The holding company. The property. I know you gave it to her." He paled slightly, but recovered quickly, the practiced mask of indignation sliding back into place. "That's ridiculous. I moved some assets around, diversified." "Don't lie to me anymore, John," I said softly, but with a steel edge. I slid the newspaper across the coffee table. "Celeste was indicted yesterday." He froze. His eyes flickered down to the paper, then snapped back up to my face. Disbelief warred with dawning horror. "What?" he whispered. "Indicted? For what?" "Tax fraud," I said, watching him. Every subtle shift in his expression. The initial shock, the confusion, then the sickening realization. He knew. He knew exactly what this meant. His money, the millions he'd given her, was now evidence. Evidence in a federal criminal case. And he was connected. "No," he breathed, shaking his head. "No, that's impossible. The money it was handled." "Was it?" I raised an eyebrow. Because federal investigators tend to look very closely at large, unexplained sums of money moving around, especially when they land in accounts connected to people who aren't exactly declaring it as income. Like, say, millions of dollars used to buy property through a shell company, funded by a married man draining his joint accounts. His face contorted. The color drained completely. His jaw went slack. He stared at me, not with anger, but with pure, unadulterated panic. He hadn't foreseen this. He had planned for a divorce, for hiding assets from me, for starting over with Celeste, maybe even thinking I'd be too broken or too poor to fight effectively. But he hadn't planned for Celeste getting caught in a federal dragnet, bringing his own fraudulent activities into the spotlight. You? His voice was rough, disbelieving. How do you know this? How? I know everything, John, I said, leaning forward slightly. I wasn't just sitting here doing nothing while you dismantled our life. I was watching. I was learning. I was waiting. And then the screaming started. It wasn't directed at me, not really, not at first. It was a guttural cry of pure, blindsided fury and terror.
No. No.
She can't. They can't. That money, that was supposed to be. He surged to his feet, pacing, running a hand through his hair, his eyes wild. This is your fault, he suddenly roared, pointing a trembling finger at me. You did this. You somehow. Yes, John. I cut him off, my voice calm, cold. I did. I gave the authorities the information. I showed them where to look. I connected the dots between you, Celeste, the company, and the money. Your $3 million gift wasn't just theft from me. It was potentially evidence of tax evasion and fraud. And now, Celeste is facing serious charges. And you, well, accessory to fraud, facilitating tax evasion, civil asset forfeiture. I imagine the list of potential legal issues for you is quite long right now. He stared at me, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. He had thought he was untouchable, that the money was gone forever, safely hidden with his mistress. He hadn't considered that his mistress might be less adept at hiding massive, undeclared income than he was at siphoning it away, or that her separate legal troubles would expose his actions. He had been so focused on outmaneuvering me, he hadn't seen the bigger picture, the risks inherent in his elaborate scheme. His plan hadn't just failed, it had spectacularly backfired, setting off a chain reaction that would likely cost him far more than the $3 million he stole. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He crumpled slightly, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a look of utter defeat. The man who had stolen my future suddenly saw his own crumble before his eyes, not by my direct hand in the divorce court he expected, but through a side door he never even knew was there, a door I had quietly opened. He screamed again, a raw, animal sound of a cornered man. But this time I didn't flinch. I just watched him, the architect of my ruin, facing his own. The aftermath wasn't triumphant in the way you see in movies. There were no dramatic courtroom victories, no tearful reconciliations. Just the slow, messy unraveling of a life built on lies. John's legal situation became precarious almost instantly. With Celeste facing federal charges, the source of her sudden wealth became a key point of investigation. My detailed information, initially provided anonymously, became crucial. The authorities were very interested in the man who had funneled millions into her accounts, especially if those funds hadn't been properly accounted for on his end either. The divorce proceeded, but the dynamics had completely shifted. The conversation wasn't about me fighting to recover dissipated assets. It was about John fighting to protect himself from potential criminal charges and the civil forfeiture of whatever remaining assets he had, assets now tainted by their connection to Celeste's case. His lawyers tried to downplay his involvement, to paint him as a naive benefactor, but the sheer volume of the transfers, the timing, and the elaborate structures they'd used made that story impossible to sell. The divorce settlement, when it finally came, wasn't everything that was taken. Nothing ever could replace the years of trust broken or the sheer amount of emotional wreckage left behind. But it was significant. With the threat of federal investigation hanging over him and facing the possibility of having all his assets scrutinized and potentially seized, John became cooperative. Desperate to limit the damage, he agreed to a settlement that returned a substantial portion of the stolen funds, more than I ever would have recovered fighting him through traditional divorce channels focused solely on dissipation. The money wasn't the clean, hopeful $3 million I'd dreamt of retiring on. It came back tangled in legal fees and bitter memories, but it was enough. Enough to rebuild. Enough to live. Enough to stand on my own 2 feet. Celeste went to trial. I wasn't called as a witness, but I followed the proceedings from afar. The details that emerged confirmed my fears. The scale of the financial maneuvering, the casual way they'd treated millions of dollars, the blatant disregard for laws and regulations. It was a world away from the quiet life I had built, the life he had so carelessly destroyed. She was convicted. John, I think, cut a deal. Avoided criminal charges, but faced civil penalties, fines, investigations into his business practices. His reputation was in tatters. His relationship with Celeste, unsurprisingly, didn't survive her legal troubles and his financial downfall. The lavish life they had planned, built on a foundation of lies and stolen money, collapsed. I moved. Not to the coastal bungalow, not yet. Maybe someday. I bought a small house just for me, a place that felt clean, untainted. The money is back in an account, not for retirement dreams just yet, but for security, for rebuilding, for therapy. The scars are deep. The betrayal cut to the bone. I learned a brutal lesson about trust, about the hidden lives people lead, about how quickly everything you think is solid can turn to dust. But I also learned about my own resilience, about the quiet strength that emerges when you have nothing left to lose. I wasn't the broken woman he thought he had left behind. I was the one who found the path through the darkness, who turned the tables not with vengeance, but with cold, hard facts and a strategic mind he never knew I possessed. He stole my future, but he couldn't steal my resolve. And in the end, his attempt to build a new life on the ruins of mine led only to his own destruction. There's no joy in that, not real joy. Just a quiet, weary sense of justice. The air feels lighter now. The future is still uncertain, but it's mine to build, brick by painful brick, on a foundation of my own making. And this time, I'll build it alone, stronger and wiser, carrying the weight of what happened not as a burden, but as armor. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version in the comments below. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.